Good morning, children. In the previous videos, we have learnt about lesson 1, the tattered blanket of Unit 1. So today we are going to learn the poem My Mother from Unit 1. This poem is written by the great poet Rabindranath Tagore. Now, before going into the poem, let us know the importance of mother. So, in everyone's life, mother is very important, isn't it? So, let us see the importance of mother. Mother. She loves her baby even before it is born. She remembers you kicking her when you were in her womb as a great memory. She dreams about how her baby would look, how it feels resting in her arms. She does everything required and sacrifices anything just to keep her baby smiling. She undergoes several hardships but never lets you cry with hunger. She patiently watches her child when it takes the first step of its life. If you fall, her love, patience, and understanding awaits with open arms. Despite her tiredness, she never goes to bed without telling a bedtime story or singing a lullaby. She gives up her entire life to bring up her children in this world. Watching her child advance and graduate through each year of schooling, her heart dances with joy and pride. This is what mother is. Okay? Now you all love your mother. Now this is a wonderful poem written by Rabindranath Tagore. Let us know about the poet now. Rabindranath Tagore was born in 1861 and died in the year 1941. He is popularly known as Vishwakavi and Gurudev. He was the founder of Shanti Niketan, an experimental school. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for his Gitanjali, the Song of Offerings. Each of his poems reflects Indian vision and love towards his motherland. He is considered the voice of Indian heritage and spiritualism. Now, let us read the poem My Mother, written by Rabindranath Tagore. I cannot remember my mother, only sometime in the midst of my play. A tune seems to hover over my playthings. The tune of some song that she used to hum while rocking my cradle. I cannot remember my mother, but when in the early autumn morning the smell of the shuli flowers floats in the air, the scent of the morning service in the temple comes to me as the scent of my mother. I cannot remember my mother only when from my bedroom window I send my eyes into the blue of the distant sky. I feel that the stillness of my mother's gaze on my face has spread all over the sky. So beautifully here Rabindranath Tagore describes about his mother in this poem. So it is a gentle nostalgic poem written by Guru Rabindranath Tagore. He is one of the greatest poets of modern India. Rabindranath Tagore's mother she passed away when he was young. In this poem, he expresses his inability to recall the face or the features of his mother. When he looks at his playthings, he seems to be able to hear a tune. Perhaps his mother often sang the same song when she moved his cradle gently. And in autumn, the shoo leaf tree blossoms into fragrant tiny flowers. and that gives a very nice fragrance, those flowers. And he remembers his mother would string the flowers for the morning service in the temple when he smells the scent of shuli flowers. He recalls his mother. So he remembers that his mother used to string those shuli flowers for the morning service in the temple. So he recalls his mother when he smells that shuli flowers. When he sees from his bedroom window into the blue of the distant sky, he feels the stillness of his mother's gaze. This poem eloquently reveals the emotional bonding between the poet and his mother, which shows a great impact on the poet. So, this is what the summary of the poem. Let us look into the first stanza of the poem. I cannot remember my mother, only sometime in the midst of my play, a tune seems to hover over my playthings, the tune of some song that she used to hum while rocking my cradle. In this first stanza, Rabindranath Tagore says that he hardly remembers his mother as she passed away when he was very young. The playthings he played with reminds him of his mother's voice, which she used to hum while rocking his cradle. This shows that the poet is really missing his mother and want to recollect every sweet moment he had with his mother. So in these lines, the poet just reminds about his mother when he was playing with his playthings. Okay, so in this actually the poet says the figure of speech used in this stanza is imagery. So the poet uses the imagery figure of speech. In this stanza, the figure of speech, imagery, there are 5 types, and this is the figure of speech used over here is auditory imagery, which auditory imagery means which tells us about the sounds. So here the poet hears the music, that means the whatever the song that mother has sung to him. So he hears. So here the sound, whenever any sound is heard, it is the poet has used over here the auditory imagery. The figure of speech used over here in this stanza is auditory imagery. Okay, and the next figure of speech is alliteration. What is the alliteration used over here? Look at in the first stanza. What is alliteration? Alliteration means the repetition of the words, the first letter of the words. See in the first stanza, I cannot remember my mother. So here my mother, M. The starting of the letter of any words used like this with the same letter, repetition of the letter, then it becomes alliteration. So the poet has used alliteration as well as imagery in this stanza. Okay, like that. And then even look at the fourth line of the first stanza, the tune of some song that she used. Okay, some song that she used. So the repetition of the first letter, S. So here also you can say the alliteration is used. So this way you can find out the alliteration in the poem. Now have you understood the meaning of the first stanza, children? Let us look into the second stanza. I cannot remember my mother, but when in the early autumn morning the smell of the shuli flowers floats in the air, the scent of the morning service in the temple comes to me as the scent of my mother. In this lines, the poet says that how the sweet smell of the shuli flowers reminds him of his mother. And these flowers bloom in the autumn season, and during his childhood his mother used to offer these flowers to the god, and during the morning service, or sometimes even she used to wear them in her hair. So he just recalls the smell of the flowers. When he smells these flowers, it reminds him of his mother. So here in this lines, in this the even the fragrance of shoe leaf flowers, that adds a life to his memory in this stanza. He describes it so beautifully, and in these lines we call it the imagery that the poet has used is olfactory. Olfactory, olfactory. It's olfactory imagery. So we call it as, now I told you, imagery is a figure of speech which is of 5 types. And in the first stanza, the poet has used the auditory imagery. In the second stanza, the poet has used olfactory imagery. And olfactory imagery tells us about the smells, the fragrance, like scents and all that. Okay, so here the poet has used olfactory imagery. Okay, and even here in these lines you can find the alliteration. I told you alliteration is nothing but the repetition of the first letter of the words. Okay, the smell of the shoe leaf flowers floats in the air. Smell shoe leaf. Okay, here you can just see the repetition of the first letter. The scent of the morning service in the temple. Scent, service. Okay, so like that you can find out the alliteration also. When we feel the repetition of the first letter is made in 3 or 4 words in a line of a stanza, then we can call it as alliteration. Okay, so have you understood the meaning of the second stanza? Now let us see the third stanza. I cannot remember my mother, only when from my bedroom window I send my eyes into the blue of the distant sky, I feel that the stillness of my mother's grace on my face has spread all over the sky. Now, in this third stanza, the poet says that whenever he looks at the sky through his bedroom window, he feels like his mother is gazing at him with love and affection. So here he looks at the sky, he sees the image of his mother as if she has he imagines, he has never seen his mother, but he imagines the on the sky the picture of his image of his mother, as if she is looking at him from his bedroom window, showing love and affection towards him. So this shows that everything he looks at in his room, and even in the nature, even in the nature is reminding him of his mother. So this unbound love towards his mother is very beautifully expressed in this poem by the poet. So the poet, over here in this third stanza, the type of imagery is the visual and kinesthetic imagery. It is called as visual and kinesthetic imagery. The poet has used the figure of speech. The type of imagery that he has used in the third stanza is visual kinesthetic imagery. So which means that the sight and emotions, which is filled up with the sight and emotions. Visual and kinesthetic imagery means the sight and emotions which is involved in that. So here the poet, he sees the picture, the image of his mother in the distant sky, the stillness of the sky, and he gets the emotions that his mother is showing his love towards him, looking with love and affection towards him. So that is the emotion that he gets. So here the figure of speech used is visual kinesthetic imagery. In the first stanza it is auditory imagery. In the second stanza it is olfactory imagery, and in the third stanza it is visual kinesthetic imagery. So have you understood the figure of speech that is used, children? So in the next class we shall see the figurative language used in the poem and the textual exercises of the poem. Thank you.